From the North Country, good to have you with us on this Thursday, the Ed Schultz Internet broadcast. President clearing the deck yesterday, very confident, to the point, about the Iran nuclear deal. Let's see where it all unfolds in Congress. The big political story is Donald Trump. He continues to suck all the air out of the room. I'll have commentary on that in this broadcast coming up. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSafe team bring you this podcast. So if Trump is sucking all the air out of the room right now, who's going to get what's left? I think it's probably going to be Scott Walker next Tuesday. There's going to be an announcement in Ohio. I think John Kasich is going to be jumping into the race. That would bring us to the number of 16 on the Republican side. The best thing Chris Christie can do is call Obama a liar when it comes to the Iranian nuclear deal. That's what his response was. So Cruz goes and meets with Trump. He's trying to get some camera time. They're all calling the shows trying to get on where they know they're not going to get challenged. But the guy who does have the conservative ledger as a governor, it's not Christie, it's not Kasich. I mean, if you're going to stand up and give a speech, whether he completed it or not as far as legislative accomplishments, if he just attempted to do it, Walker has thought this out in Wisconsin. This is what he said during his announcement the other day, which I give the guy credit. From a conservative standpoint, he knows exactly what the hardliners want to hear. He knows exactly what the billionaires want to hear, and he understands the long-term generational mission of attacking labor. Here's Walker.
Since I've been governor, we took on the unions and we won. We lowered taxes by $2 billion. In fact, we lowered taxes on individuals, on employers, and property owners. Property taxes today are lower than they were 4 years ago. How many other governors can say that? Since I've been governor, we passed lawsuit reform and regulatory reform. We defunded Planned Parenthood and passed pro-life legislation. We enacted Castle Doctrine and concealed carry. We have a program right here in Wisconsin that requires people to be signed up for one of our employability training programs, one of our job training programs before they can get a welfare check. And now, as of the budget I just signed, we make the same requirement to make sure people can pass a drug test. And we now require a photo ID to vote in this state.
Go down the list. What have conservatives done over the last 30 years? Attacked unions. What have they always believed in? Reducing taxes. Tort reform, lawsuit reform, they love that too. Frivolous lawsuits. Regulations, anytime you can strip them out, they love that. Defunding Planned Parenthood, showing pro-life across the board and denying women the right to do what they want to do with their body. The Castle Doctrine, that cuts to the gun chase. About, hey, man, look, you can certainly go along with arming yourself in your own home, can't you? That's red meat to righties. And oh, let's not forget voter ID. So this is a ledger. This is what he has done or attempted to do with some measurable success. And so now the president of the largest alliance of unions in the United States offered just 6 words in response to Walker announcing he wants to be president, and that is, Scott Walker is a national disgrace. That's what Richard Trumka had to say. And I would imagine that many union folk around the country would really, really line up with him on that. Let's check with Leo Gerard. He's the president of the United Steelworkers International. Mr. Gerard, good to have you with us.
Oh, thank you, Ed. Good to be with you. I just want to quickly ask you to do one thing. Never call it voter ID again. It's voter suppression. And,
yeah, that's true. It certainly is.
When we, what all the right wingers are good at is adopting and stealing language, and creating an image. This is not voters showing up and showing their ID. Why would you shorten the time for early voting? Why would you make it harder to vote and then call it voter ID when there's been no fraudulent voting records? And I've had to catch myself many times.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. It is. You know, when you look at how they've cut early voting days, when they've cut registration days, when they put restrictions on the youth, The photo ID obviously is aimed at the elderly when they have put polling places in places that have never been there before. All of this is about suppression. You're exactly right.
To go to your real question, he's throwing red meat to the extreme right-wing base. There's actually a lot of what used to be called moderate Republicans that are very uncomfortable with this guy, and everything that he just ran through on that list is going to be detrimental to him if he should be able to win the nomination from Donald Trump. I want to see the runoff between him and Trump. That's what I want to see. But and what's not coming out of his mouth is what's happened to the Wisconsin economy while he's been doing that. What's happened to the Wisconsin economy is it's amongst the lowest of the 50 states in job creation. He's dismantling and damaging one of the best higher education systems at the University of Wisconsin. He's created one of the highest levels of unemployment. That he didn't create any jobs. The jobs he screamed that he would create didn't come anywhere close to that. And in fact, his economic record is dismal. Now, he did cut taxes for rich people. He did go after women. He did go after minorities and seniors and young people with voter suppression. He did all those things, but they're going to come back to haunt him should he succeed. And like I said, him and Donald Trump and Ted Cruz make the good triple threat to democracy.
Well, who would you want to see get the nomination over on the Republican side? I mean, I mean, and you don't have to answer it, but I mean, do you think in some way that Walker would be good because he's done so much anti-worker stuff?
Look, I think that what you got to, and what he doesn't gather, is when you're anti-worker, anti-labor movement, anti-collective bargaining, you're not just anti the labor movement. All the progressive movements that we work with, the environmental movement, the women's movement, the anti-poverty movement, the civil rights movement, all of those fair housing movement, all of those movements would be mobilized. And when you start to tell the truth about his record, we had that fight in the last election, if you remember, about defunding a number of women's issues. And it started to backfire on the Republicans. They started backing away from it. So he's throwing red meat. But the groups that he's attacking, when they all come together, we're the majority in the country. We're the majority.
There's no question about it.
Say, who would you like to see run? Look at the only one that I think could actually come across over time looking a little bit sensible, or the least crazy maybe, is Jeb Bush, but he's no prize either.
No, he isn't.
Let's have Ted Cruz. Let's have Donald Trump. Let's have Scott Walker. Many of these people are out of step with what's happening in the country. They're out of step with what young people say. I mean, he's going to attack the gay movement. I mean, which movement didn't he attack? And once you put those together, we're the majority.
Taking a look at Trump, what is his record with organized labor over the years? What is his? Do you get a feel for where he is on collective bargaining? Do you get a feel for where he is on a living wage?
Look, I think the problem for Donald Trump and a problem for a lot of people is they don't really know which Donald Trump to look at. And from what I know, because I don't have much dealings with him or the sector that he's heavily involved in, but what I know from what I've heard is that when he was very much a progressive liberal in let's say 15, 16 years ago, he was for the women's right to choose. He was for universal health care. He was for taxes on rich people when he thought that was going to be his ticket out. Then all of a sudden now he's decided he's got to be on the red meat side. And so it depends on which Donald Trump you're going to get. But I honestly believe that should he come out as the nominee, that the gap between the successful Democrat and Donald Trump will be the largest election victory in 50 years for a Democrat. You know.
Yeah.
But, and I actually think, Ed, that if you have the right Democrat in the right campaign that can get the truth out about Ted Cruz or Scott Walker or any of those, this is not a good year for Republican or terms, not year, good time for Republican presidential candidates, because you got to decide not which one is the best, but which one is the least crazy.
Yeah. I saw a bumper sticker while I was on vacation. It said, "Support Trump. Why just go half crazy?" It's the first one I saw this political season. All right, yeah. Leo Gerard with us. He's the United Steelworkers International president. There's going to be some wrangling going on back and forth between union folk about Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Is there a fight brewing? Is there going to be a tug of war here? Is this going to be a tough decision? Is this going to be, do you think there'd be an endorsement coming from the AFL-CIO one way or another? How do you see this landscape?
Well, look, I think that Rich Trumka has said the right thing. And Rich has said, look, let's keep our powder dry. Let's let the candidates make their case. And let's pose our issues in front of them and see how they deal with it. There's no doubt in my mind that both Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton will have enough money, enough resources to make this a race. And we have to let things play out. And we have an AFL-CIO, what I'll call it a questionnaire, although it may not be that formalized, but an AFL-CIO series of issues that we want to get the candidates to respond to. And you know, I'm not a fan of the governor of Maryland for a number of reasons that are much more related to our union. Mm-hmm. But any one of those three candidates would be a hell of a lot better than any Republican.
Sure.
And I do think it's going to be hard to get an endorsement at the AFL-CIO at decision time, because you need a 2/3 majority.
Which is coming up here at the end of July, isn't it? Isn't there an executive meeting coming up the 26th and 27th?
At the end of July, but I don't think that will be the time when we make the endorsement. We've never had an endorsement or an attempt for endorsement that far ahead of the election.
Sure.
There'll probably be a follow-up meeting of the full executive council early in the new year, and that would probably be the time that there'll be a more serious decision about should we endorse now.
All right. So it sounds like
I just going to say that the one thing about the current economic and political climate, the Republicans may not sense it, but if you're out in the real world, people are fed up. People have seen that the right-wing agenda in Congress and at the state level doesn't work for ordinary people. And I think that Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and Senator Brown and Senator Franken and a whole bunch of progressives in the Senate, as this debate goes on, are going to be talking about the things that make people interested in taking part in the political process by going out and working and voting. It's going to move Hillary Clinton that she's going to have to deal with those issues as well. And we're going to end up, I think, with a program on the Democratic side that is going to be much more like a democratic presidential. And as Howard used to say, the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party is going to be much more effective this round.
Well, it just seems to me, Mr. Gerard, that there is a fight right now for the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. Yeah. That you can say that, well, Bernie Sanders is moving Hillary to the left. Wait a minute. All of the issues that Bernie Sanders is talking about are polling in the majority with Americans. This is a populist progressive movement. And so I think that there's no doubt that Hillary is being drawn out with some answers that maybe she wouldn't be forced to give if Bernie was not in the race. But there's something going on here. This net roots that's taking place this weekend out on the West Coast. Hillary's not going to be there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just, God, I mean, why infuriate people?
Yeah, look, I say that, you know, we have 800,000 members in almost every part of the country. and we have all kinds of work going on all the time, so we're getting continuous information from ordinary folks, some of them whose family are working, husband or wife, kids are working, that whole network that we have in our union. And I can say without fear of being wrong that the country is feeling much, much more, quote, progressive. Much, much more important is the populist agenda than it used to be. And in that regard, it doesn't mean that you could get elected on the Democratic side if you didn't adopt the populist agenda, because that's where the country is.
Yeah.
The country wants more health care. The country wants people to be able to vote. The company wants a higher minimum wage. The company wants the manufacturing to be here. The country does. We got all those things that are on that side. The country knows these trade deals have been shit, to be blunt.
Yeah.
And and manipulated. And that's one of the problems we're going to have as we fought so hard to defeat this trade deal. People are going to say, why did a Democratic president bring you a trade deal? And to tell you the truth, Ed, I don't have an answer.
Yeah. Leo Gerard, always great to visit. United Steelworkers International President. Mr. Gerard, love your insight. A great fighter for American workers, no question about it. Always a pleasure.
You're our champion. Thank you.
You bet, my friend. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this podcast. Now this. Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegoted.com, or go to biogreenclean.com. www.biogreenclean and order today.
The Ed Schultz Internet broadcast is brought to you by the Ring of Fire radio show. Listen to the Ring of Fire weekends on radio stations across the country. Get more information and the news of the day at ringofireradio.com.
Communication Workers of America bringing this podcast. CWA working with progressive allies to save democracy. They got a great website, cwa-union.org. More on Scott Walker, in case you missed it. The Ag Secretary, Tom Vilsack, who I'm not a huge fan of because he tipped over on cool. That's another story. Country origin labeling to satisfy a trade agreement. But anyway, he's claiming, Vilsack, Ag Secretary, that Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker is making a big mistake with his lawsuit against the federal government over drug testing food stamp recipients. This just goes to show how radical Walker is, that you can't get food stamps unless you are drug tested. Let's go to Ruth Conniff, editor, Progressive Magazine. Ruth, good to have you with us.
Great to be here, Ed.
Isn't this a microcosm of what Walker is all about, pulling a stunt like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really important to understand about this, very loud call he's making to drug test what he calls welfare recipients, which includes food stamp recipients and includes people who get unemployment benefits, actually, is that it's not just that he doesn't really understand federal law. I mean, this is a high-profile move on Walker's part, and if you watched his speech when he announced for president, it was really fascinating what an important piece of his campaign this very measure is. And it comes in the context of a candidate who announced in Waukesha, which is a wealthy, almost entirely white suburb of Milwaukee and Walker's base, where racial animus towards Milwaukee is a driving force of Republican politics. And so the background of this is Walker gives his presidential announcement. He says he's been tremendously successful. People all over the state of Wisconsin scratch their heads because, as you know and have reported repeatedly, we lag the entire nation in job creation. We're at the very bottom of our region now. I mean, Walker has presided over the destruction of the economy in Wisconsin, the voucherization of our school system, a huge and unpopular cut to the university. What's he talking about when he says that he's been successful with his reforms? Well, it turns out he gives a litany of points that are huge applause lines in Waukesha, and all of them have to do with drug testing, welfare recipients, voter ID, defunding Planned Parenthood was one of them, but mostly they have to do with race. And what he is doing is he's doing what Donald Trump does. He's appealing to a very ugly strain of racism in the Republican base, and he's getting a lot of traction with it. And in fact, it's always been a driving force of his political career, because it is the right-wing radio talkers on the outskirts of Milwaukee who are not afraid to say some really ugly racist stuff, who have really taken over the party, the Republican Party in Wisconsin, and have driven Walker's rise. And I think that's what this whole conversation exposes.
There is no question that Walker is a Koch brother favorite, or am I reading that wrong? I mean, if the Koch, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, David Koch let slip that Walker was his favorite candidate. And, you know, the takeover of Wisconsin really happened because of the Koch brothers deciding that Walker was their guy. And so, you know, when our writer and the Buffalo Beast blogger Ian Murphy called Walker and said, you know, he was David Koch, and Walker chatted with him amiably, you know, that was just a public airing of what is very clear, that the Koch brothers are behind a lot of Walker's policies. I mean, he is implementing the most far-right policies in Wisconsin as a test ground, and he's proud of it. He's running on it, and the Koch brothers are delighted, because our state is a petri dish of their basic drive to bust unions, depress wages, disempower workers and low-income voters so that they can control, you know, run the game. The Democratic Party no longer has union support. That's a huge win for Republicans. And, you know, they can oppress their employees. They can make more profits because there's, you know, we've just eliminated in our current budget that Walker signed prevailing wage in Wisconsin, which he sent out a special press release to say, hey, this was a New Deal era protection for workers. It doesn't exist anymore. Construction workers, there's no floor on wages anymore. You know, I mean, it is the testing of the Koch brothers' desire to turn America into a banana republic where there's a tiny elite that has enormous power and everybody else is disempowered.
Ruth Conniff, always a pleasure. Great to visit. I appreciate your time. Always informative and refreshing. Appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Ruth Conniff, editor, Progressive Magazine. Now this.
It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Oh, by the way, the House has passed a bill to keep the highway bill going, so road construction will go on for a while anyway. If all the political stuff wasn't going on, that actually would be a pretty damn good story to talk about, and the fight over the budget and everything else, but you know how it is. All right, final comments on this Thursday on the Ed Schultz Internet broadcast. It's Trump. Have you thought about what is the fascination here? The fascination with the American people, I think, with Trump is that he is brash. And that's an attention getter. He has this unvarnished point of view, no matter what the subject is. And that is refreshing and entertaining to a lot of people who have been turned off with the political process, that are, quote, politically exhausted and heard enough of this crap. And so here comes a guy who brings in an entirely new portion of the population who maybe hasn't been paying attention to politics in the past, that are just curious to see, well, how's this going to work out? That's it. It isn't any policy. It isn't any position that he has taken that is so terribly different. It's just his personality. It's Trump. And I think that there are a lot of Americans out there
who understand that he knows the news, he knows how to stay in the news. And, oh, by the way, whether it's for a health care policy or economics or whatever, he's polling well. I feel that there's a lot of Americans who appreciate and admire Trump, that he is not accountable to anyone. He's not owned by anyone. And I think that Bernie Sanders has that kind of attraction as well, that you're going to get it straight, that there's no ramification back or no kickback on the person who's saying it because they are just not owned by anybody. Trump doesn't have to do this. Bernie Sanders doesn't have to do this. There's no calculation. Their calculation on what they say is far different from everybody else who's in the process. And now you're seeing the Republican candidates start to scramble quite a bit to say, damn, how does he get on all these shows? How does he get these interviews? Why do people want to talk to him? Why don't they want to talk to me? The Republican establishment, you can just hear what they're saying. They don't know how to deal with Trump. They don't know how to corral him. They don't know how to handle him. They don't know how to manage him. They're at a point where we can't manage him. And they sure as hell can't embrace him because of the things that he has said. And so he's just sucking all the air out of the room. And I think the fact that I mentioned this yesterday, Ted Cruz is smart enough to figure out that if you want attention, go talk to Trump, because there's tons of cameras and reporters around the guy. And ask yourself the question, when was the last time you saw Ted Cruz get any kind of significant media coverage within the last several weeks before he met with Trump yesterday? I think it speaks volumes. Now, Trump has released his financials, something Mitt Romney never did. There's another piece of the pie that's somewhat attractive to people. Guy's got nothing to hide. Okay, so he's worth in excess of $10 billion. Interesting, yesterday, in his press release, he puts about his net worth, he puts $10 billion in capital letters in the press conference, like he's shouting it out at people. And then people are asking him about his money. Here's just one facet about what he's doing with his money when he's being criticized about who he gives to.
I contribute to everybody. When I need Hillary, she was there. If I say go to my wedding, they go to my wedding. I contribute to everybody. And you know what? That's part of the problem with our system, because they're going to do for me and all their donors things that aren't necessarily good for the country.
Have you heard a soundbite like that from anybody else in the Republican field? No. He's polling number one. Figure it out. This is the Ed Schultz Internet Broadcast. Tonight, the Ed Show on MSNBC, 5 o'clock Eastern. We're back tomorrow.